All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Dawson, and I'm the Assistant Vice President for Academic Innovation and Learning for the University of Louisiana System. And I am joined this afternoon by two of my favorite colleagues from the University of New Orleans. We have Beth Blankenship and Meredith King here to talk us through how we keep going in even when things don't seem like they should keep going. So whether that's situations like hurricanes last week, the pandemic from several years ago, or just any other natural or man-created disaster that absolutely could potentially happen. They're going to help advise us on how we can keep steady and stay calm. All right, ladies, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Katie.
So our title, Teaching Through the Storm, how to stay ready for anything. We had some thoughts on that last week. You're not literally teaching through the storm, maybe not even the day after. We just want to start by acknowledging that this is really about understanding and living with our limits and still doing what we do and supporting our students and getting them to the other side with their learning goals intact to the extent that we can.
So just a little bit on who we are and why we are giving you this presentation. Obviously, I'm Meredith King. I'm the Assistant Director for the Center for Teaching Innovation at the University of New Orleans. And speaking before was Beth Blankenship. She's the Director of the Center for Teaching Innovation at the University of New Orleans. And like all of you, we have to deal with the things that Katie was saying. New Orleans specifically dealing with that storm last week. This was particularly on our minds. But one of our main jobs at the Center for Teaching Innovation, I'm sure all of you have a Center for Teaching or Learning or something to that effect at your universities. One of our jobs is helping faculty figure out their pedagogical strategies for a variety of teaching possibilities. Sometimes that's online, sometimes that's in person, sometimes that's something somewhere in between. But this really falls into that space where people are going to probably need to shift from one modality into another, which is why we think about this a lot and we wanted to be able to bring this to you. So again, we think about those sort of unique hazards to Louisiana that Beth, you're always saying that how do you phrase it? That we're always coming first, or we're the bellwether. You have a good way of
we're right on
phrasing that.
We're at the edge.
We're at the edge. That's it.
Everything starts here. We're always Katrina pointed to what was coming. We've had a number of things along that line, but literally our coastline is. I'm saying literally, but I think our coastline is a metaphor for things hit us first, and then they go throughout the United States and across the world.
And so these are Louisiana hazards, but they could happen theoretically anywhere. They just do happen here. Climate, obviously a big one that we worry about. Health, we all had to deal with COVID-19. And then security, I think we know at the UL system, a few of our schools had some security issues, which is a definite hazard that we can have that you're going to have to think about that may change the way that you are teaching or change some of that preparedness that you need to do. So those are the ways that we're thinking about hazards. And just as a reminder, I don't really think any of you need it, but just as a reminder, Louisiana has dealt with all of these emergency shutdown situations very recently in the past few years. So you can see we just, have cute little icons for everything. If only hurricanes were as cute as these little icons.
Since you made this slide a year ago, we need to add wildfires. So.
Oh, I thought I had wildfires on here, and then
and mentioning.
I don't.
Even as we were working remotely last week, trying to get back in touch with our students and continue what we could, I had family in California who had to evacuate their home for an encroaching wildfire, and another friend experiencing an earthquake in LA. So yeah, what we've got here is unique to us, but then not in the big picture.
So go ahead, Beth.
Oh, fine. So we did the big COVID pivot 4 years ago. And basically people who had never taught online or done it as seldomly as possible, had their hands up whenever they were asked to do, were thrown in. We did what we could to support them. We gave them access to Zoom. We helped them put together, ways of displaying their documents and working through stuff on boards or whiteboards or whatever options they had. We actually had some classrooms on campus designed that they could come in and record. And then once they no longer had to do that, by far the majority of them retreated back, and maybe that's the wrong word. They returned to the in-person classroom and said, don't ask me to do that again. But of course, even since then, we've had all the incidents that Meredith so aptly illustrated on that previous slide. And so what we've been shifting to is trying to persuade people, in particular people who teach in-person courses, to get more familiar with their online resources, because we know it is a fact they will be asked to go back to teaching online, even if for an afternoon, for a week, for whatever amount of time. And so we're trying to make that more thoughtful, more controlled by them for what they feel comfortable doing, and give them a range of options.
Yeah, so the idea is to have online readiness as your emergency preparedness plan. That is how you are preparing for any of these emergencies that could happen and are happening to all of our schools, is that you can create online readiness even for your in-person classes, even in a different modality, you can have that set up. So knowing that most faculty are not online teachers, what is the reason that they have to have that online preparedness for what we call emergency remote teaching, right? So that isn't the type of teaching where you are trained in online teaching and you are signed up for online teaching and you've been through whatever credentialing it is for online teaching. That situations like a hurricane where you have to be online for a week, like man, these are all New Orleans things, a flood where you have to be online for an afternoon, like a pandemic where you have to be online for a year. Anything like that is going to be an emergency remote situation. So we want to think about the questions of why is it important that they do that? And then how do they do that both pedagogically and then technically? I personally hate it when I get on some sort of a webinar and everyone's like, here are the theoretical reasons why. And I'm like, great, but what did you do? What are the steps? So we want to make sure that we're taking you through both of those things in this presentation. So we're going to start with that first question, why?
So I'm putting myself before my students here. It's the old put your mask on in the airplane before you then help your seatmate. Preparing yourself for what you might need to do from a hotel room, from your house with only a cell connection, whatever that might be, will then put you in a place to help your students. The more you're prepared ahead of time, the speedier your response is going to be. And keep in mind, your attention is on other things as well while you're reacting to whatever has led your university, your institution, the state, or whatever to call for a remote pivot. Things will go wrong, especially with a prolonged period. So again, being prepared, you'll have some things ready to move on with. You'll have some ways of adapting. Your students will have a number of different situations that they're in. You'll have your own crises, but you'll be calm because you're already ready. You've got some stuff in the can ready to go, or you've got a structure that you've put together. And so kind of a script that you can follow rather than making it up as you go along. The stress factor is going to be high, possibly by whatever incident is causing you to move to remote teaching, but also by the remote teaching as well. And finally, we're looking at keeping in mind that all of the things we want to do normally in a classroom to be aware of our students' needs, the range of experiences that they have that inform their abilities in the classroom, equitable teaching, trauma-informed teaching, that you're still able to keep those things in play and that we don't throw those out the window in an emergency situation.
So we also want to help our students, right? So first we're thinking about ourselves, because you can't help anyone unless you're helping yourself. And we truly do believe that this is help for you as a faculty member. But we also want to help our students, right? That's what we're here for as faculty. And so we want to think about things like consistency, community, familiarity, and interaction. What does that mean? So the consistency of this, if you have pre-prepped, it's going to help keep that digital practice the same, because your students are going to be stressed out too. You're going to be stressed out. They're going to be stressed out. They're not used to doing this. This isn't the type of class that they signed up for. The situation that is going on is going on. All of those factors. So anything that you can do to be practicing ahead of time, to set something up ahead of time, is going to help with that consistency and continuity after the storm has passed. Again, we sort of rethought that title a little bit given our experience last week. But, you know, once the storm has passed and power is back on and everyone has a little bit more access, but maybe you're not ready to come back yet, in that place, you want to be able to continue that continuity. You want your students to know where to look. You want them to know what to do. You want to have community. So students and teachers, they need community during emergency remote teaching. And whether that is just an email that says, hey, we are all here together, we're all going through this, we all have needs, here's some resources, or something larger, a forum, a space for them to interact, they need that community. And so setting up digital community in advance sets the expectation that this is how you create community. This is how you interact, so that they know that. Again, that goes back to that consistency and works because of the next point, familiarity, right? They do better when they're already familiar with the technology tools. If we learned one thing from COVID, it is that people do not know these tools and needed to be trained on them. I don't want to have to do that while I'm worrying about, I don't know, using my cell phone because I don't have power, or my internet has gone out, or my kids are at home because their school is closed. I don't want to have to worry about those things, both as a teacher, but as a student especially. I want my students to be able to know the digital tools and have access to them already. So that's something I'm going to set up before emergency remote teaching. And then, again, this sort of all ties in together, keeping that constant interaction. Obviously, keep yourself first. You have to do what you have to do for you. But the sooner that you can send out an email saying, hey, this is what's going on, here's when I'm going to expect this to be done, and here's how it's going to be done. Here's what I'm doing to help you. Here's what we're doing to create a community and be together. We're falling back on our plans. We did our fire drill, like we talked about in the previous slide. We know how to do this. We're ready to do this. I'm going to stay with you. I'm here with you. I have interaction for you. You haven't fallen away just because something bad has happened. So, okay, that's all the high-minded stuff of why we should do this. So let's get to that how. And remember, we're going to talk about that in 2 stages. We're going to talk about that in pedagogical how and in technical how. So first, you got to do some pedagogical prep. You got to do some thinking ahead of time and some setting up in a theoretical sense, as well as that technical. But you got to do some mental work ahead of time to set up your class to make this happen. Again, otherwise you're not going to have this ready and it will be chaos. So Beth, you want to take us through HighFlex?
Sure. I'm not actually going to teach anyone how to do HighFlex teaching today, but I want to think of it as a concept that starts us looking at our in-person teaching and any experience we have with online teaching and how they can flow back and forth between the two. Same thing with synchronous and asynchronous contact with our students. We're familiar, and even people who had bad teaching experiences during COVID had experiences, so they can build on those. People who are new to this can learn more about it. There's a lot of support out there for it. But thinking in terms of, I teach in a classroom, but I can use the LMS as an asynchronous support base for my class, and I can move back and forth between the two comfortably because I've put a little bit of time into learning how, is where I think we start by being truly ready for anything that can happen. I taught mostly in person for the vast majority of my teaching career. And even when I was teaching online, that was usually one course at a time on top of a regular load, which was composition mainly and some lit courses. And over several years, once we actually got an LMS in place, I started using the LMS to go ahead and put my syllabus, put the handouts I'd created week by week, set up my writing assignments, because I found it's so much easier for me to grade digitally. It may not be that way for you, still print things out, but if all of that stuff is in the LMS, even if I've hidden some of it from student access and release it when I want, because I want to, keep them coming to class, lecture notes, PowerPoints, whatever, then, by the end of a semester or so of doing that, I've kind of got an online class outlined and propagated that could actually just go fully online. But certainly it was there for me when we needed to move to online teaching. And my first experience with that was during Katrina, when we moved all of our courses at UNO onto Blackboard. And I was so grateful that I had prepared a little bit for that. That's 20 years ago almost. So that kind of started me on the path towards seeing the LMS as my friend, even for in-person teaching. So HyFlex Learning is really just a way of kind of making those things come together and feeling comfortable in each of those modes, in person and online, synchronous and asynchronous. So that throws in the Zoom or some kind of live chat option. So as that is a basis, then you can move forward.
Sorry, wasn't trying to cut you off.
No, that's good. It's exactly the right time to move
Yeah,
on. Thanks for taking the portion.
So let's talk about using a framework like universal design for learning. So if we're talking about something like HyFlex and being somewhat flexible, which is really what we're going to have to do, and all of our pedagogical stuff is going to really hinge on those sort of flexible and understanding ideas. What is a way that we can sort of pedagogically set this up and think about this, and how can we make this easier on ourselves? Well, if you're teaching from a place like universal design for learning, you're already going to have a lot of this stuff built into the way that you are teaching. So I could give a whole, 3-hour-long talk on universal design for learning. I am pretty obsessed with this as a concept. But the main thing that you need to know about universal design for learning, if you've never come across it, is that it's going to tell you to have sort of three different points. It wants you to have multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. And what that sort of is you want to be able to have variety, flexibility, and difference and option in the why. So that's multiple means of engagement, thinking about interest, relevance, motivation. Why are your students doing this? Why are they getting engaged? Multiple means of representation is the what of learning. This is a huge one, and I'm going to come back to it because it is really, really big in terms of that flexibility and some of those things that you're going to need during a storm. And then multiple means of action and expression, think of the how. So again, things that you'd need during a forum, multiple formats for assessments. If you have a student who doesn't have access to a computer but has access to their phone and could leave you a voice memo describing their assignment or upload that to a discussion board, or you have a video due and they don't have good internet access, so they can't do a video, but you let them write out a script for it, right? Those multiple means of action and expression is really going to help give that flexibility. I want to go back to those means of representation though, because that big one where I say think transcription, things like that are huge during a storm. And if you already have stuff like that set up, you're so good to go. If you have PowerPoints and you give a lecture and you just set up like a little AI assistant to write down everything you've said during the lecture, or you just write out your lecture notes a little bit more cleanly or something like that, and you put those up along with the PowerPoint or the recorded presentation of your PowerPoint or whatever it is that you're doing in that emergency remote teaching. Again, in that situation where I'm on my phone with really terrible internet and I can't watch your video, something even like closed captioning is not going to help me. Something like transcription is. And so making sure that they have those multiple means of representation ready. Think about how people might need to customize their displays. I know I keep saying phones a lot, but that's a big thing during a lot of these emergencies. Even during something like COVID, students didn't have internet access. They didn't have laptops at home. They didn't have computers at home. And while there were a lot of great efforts made to get them laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots and all kinds of things to help them, in the meantime, what they could do is be on their phone for small bursts of time. And anything we can be doing to lower that bandwidth to help them is great. Again, that doesn't mean don't do your cool lecture video or your cool interactive presentation. It means think about what that sort of accessibility end is and how can you use that as something to help prepare you. So I highly, highly, highly recommend looking into teaching from a place of universal design for learning in the first place, because then when the storm hits or there's a security issue and I have to only talk to my students through Canvas or whatever it is, when that happens, I've already set all this stuff up. I'm already teaching from a place where it is universally accessible. I'm not suddenly scrambling and getting an email from students saying, oh yeah, I didn't do the homework because I couldn't watch a video, because I couldn't access the textbook. I'm not doing that at that point. I've already set this up in advance. Again, that fire drill concept, right? They've practiced, they know what they're doing, they know where to look for these things. So that's my pitch on universal design for learning. I'll pass it back over to Beth.
Thank you, Meredith. And as you were talking about that, I was realizing that's really key for any kind of shift to remote because of an emergency, for not just for an in-person class to have that kind of design, but for our online teaching, because I design my online class assuming there is no disruption. But if there is, having multiple means of completing an assignment, having shorter videos, having transcripts already in place means that my online course is more accessible and more ready to go. Because it's just not the same situation when you're delivering it from a hotel room or going in and outside of your house and supervising the guys chopping down the tree. And the same thing is happening at your students' homes. So UDL is really key to any kind of preparation for emergency teaching. UDL really forms the basis of this next element, which is trauma-informed pedagogy. Once again, you're thinking of all of the multiple needs in your classroom, the multiple personalities and people, their physical existence, what they've brought to the classroom, who they are when they've arrived, what you want them to know, and how you want them to be changed by the time they leave. Coming from a trauma-informed point of view, then allows you to address that human aspect of what you're doing, especially in this emergency setting. I believe there's a second slide for this. Yeah. So these bullet points kind of toggle up the main points of trauma-informed pedagogy. Providing content information in advance. In this case, early on in the semester, sharing with your students, here's what I'm going to do if we have a storm, an outage of some sort, some kind of reason that we have to pivot to a different form of learning. You're going to go here, you're going to check the Canvas site for my course, and I'll already have a discussion board up where you can let me know where you are, how you are, when you think you're going to be ready to get back to a classroom experience here in Canvas. You'll have contact information for me. that kind of thing. And here's, I will say in that course, what I'm hoping we can achieve over the time that we're away from our classroom. So they know in advance, they've got continuity and they've structure. Structure is a big part of trauma-informed pedagogy. Related to UDL, make sure any media you have has content descriptions so that students kind of are prepared for what they're going to encounter. That's more applicable really to whether this is an emergency teaching situation or not. Have a way to check in on students' well-being. I like having just a discussion board that is not about the content, but where they can check in once a week or a couple of times when we're gone, and just say how they're doing, share what's going on with them. Where did they relocate? I did this when we were teaching during Katrina. We didn't have video at that point in our LMS. We had a live chat room, and I figured I didn't know this at the time. My students led me to then understand they needed 10 minutes at the start of every class just to say how they were and hear from everyone else in our classroom. And once they were settled and felt secure in that, all right, you're in Alaska, I'm in Massachusetts, but we're checking in on home and we're doing okay. We could go on to discussing the content for that week. That built community. It addressed my students and let them know I recognized that they were going through the same situation I was going through. And repeating some of the points of UDL again, because I think trauma-informed pedagogy and UDL are pretty much a pair. Allowing for those multiple ways to engage with the course content, because not every student is going to have the same resources when they're especially in an emergency situation. Being flexible with assessments, and what even is an absence policy when you're in that emergency situation, but really thinking about what you'll allow, even when we're back, like we're back here now at UNO after going through Francine a few days ago. Our friends at Nichols got power back Monday. You had to have some flexibility there, right? You had to move things around, maybe reduce some of the readings or redirect some of your expectations. And finally, asking your students for what it is they need and what you can do to make that easier for them to achieve, given the outcomes you want from them, the way you're going to measure it, and how you've presented it to them. Getting some feedback is invaluable.
I do want to say before we move on, one of the things on content descriptions that people wouldn't necessarily think about is stuff that could be relevant to the situation that you're in.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I think about this one a lot because of a really silly reason. The movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button has like a whole Katrina scene.
Oh my gosh.
And I was deeply unprepared for it. And I think about stuff like that, where maybe some of my students had some sort of experience with the storm that would make them upset if I was showing that to them in a filmmaking class. And I wouldn't have thought about that. I wouldn't have necessarily put that there. Or, I'm not really sure why you would be showing something like Contagion in this environment, but maybe I'm just trying to think of examples there. But it's important. I don't know, maybe you're in a health, some sort of like biological health class, some sort of a biology field, and you are going to talk about contagions and viral disease. And maybe you just make sure that people know that this is what we're going to talk about. If you're having a hard time with it, you can come talk to me. Here's what we can do around it. I've had a situation recently that, is not emergency based, but one of the assignments that I was giving someone, I gave them a little advanced content description of some of the stuff they were going to have to engage with, and said, if you need a separate assignment, let me know. And one of my students absolutely felt brave enough to email me and tell me that they needed a separate assignment. And I was happy to honor that, because I don't want them to be thinking about their horrible triggering experience when they're trying to learn. And even though that was not something that was because of a remote teaching, you can see where something like a storm, like any big traumatic moment, would be something that someone could have that reaction to. So that's just on the forefront of my mind since that happened recently in a class I was teaching.
That's a great example. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So let's move on. That's the pedagogical prep, right? So we want you to think about HighFlex. We want you to think about universal design for learning, and we want you to think about trauma-informed teaching. Those are all the pedagogical practices. Okay, but what does that mean technically? That is all well and good to say, like, I should have stuff there in advance. What does that mean? How do I do that? It is so useless to me, like I said, when I see these things and people are like, high-minded ideas, and I'm like, but what button? But what button do I click? So let's talk about technical prep. One of the most important things that you can do for technical prep, and you've heard us mention learning management system before, is know your learning management system. There is somebody on your campus whose job it is to help you know your learning management system. I know this because I'm probably in meetings with them when we have system-wide meetings. I probably know who they are. This is their job. It's their job to help you understand it, and your job, whether you think about it or not, you're going to have to help your students understand your LMS. You are their key person. You are the person who they think of as the conduit for the whole class. So they may not necessarily think of who they would contact or who they would access to learn their learning management system besides you.
Yeah.
Check in ahead of time about their access and understanding. Set digital expectations before they are needed, and make sure that you have tech requirements for an in-person class. Tell them that they have to be able to know how to access the LMS, and take a moment in your in-person class to pull it up on your screen and go over where things are. This is where you find the syllabus. This is where you find information. I update readings here. You turn in your assignments here. If there is an emergency, I'm going to post it right here. I'm going to send it this way. It's going to be here in the learning management system. Making that your second classroom and being so familiar with it. And it really doesn't matter which LMS you are using. I know there's division in our system now, but even if you are on an entirely different one, they all have the same basic capabilities, and knowing yours and making sure that your students know your LMS is one of the best technical things that you can do to prep for this. Then there's no confusion. And again, maybe that is like, this is where the Zoom link will be. And again, those technical expectations, maybe that's you need to know how to use Zoom or Teams or whatever it is that they're going to have to learn to, they're going to have to know. Put that expectation ahead of time. Don't wait until you are doing it to discover those faults.
Going back to our first slide where we talked about, or not our first slide, but where we kind of began in the why, being prepared for things to not work. This is a good time to suss that out while they are working and you're on campus. I'm thinking right now, several of our schools were having a hard time with our digital textbooks because of some migration we've done on software. That can be the case in an emergency situation, whether you're having a workday problem or not. Students may have a harder time they may not know where to go for that. What would you do instead? How can you redirect them? How can you help them plan for that? That's the time to do it. That information beforehand. It's kind of a current issue right now, so it's on my mind.
So again, on that technical, like what button do I click kind of end of this, think about templating. So when we're saying prep all of this stuff in advance and you're thinking, oh my goodness, that's like prepping a whole second class every time I have to do a class. Mm-hmm. You're right. It is sort of like doing a whole second class. I don't want to tell you that it isn't if you're doing it from scratch every time and if you're not using the resources that are already there for you. See what your university has. I can tell you again that most, if not all of your universities have some sort of templating format that they give you, whether it's mandatory or a suggestion, where they're going to give you the outline of these things if you're teaching an online class. And you can just pull those for your in-person class for readiness purposes and for preparedness purposes. There's no reason not to. Go find what your university has. Maybe they put something in your class. Maybe they have it on a website somewhere. Maybe you have to contact someone in teaching and learning and they can give you some best practices and show you like, oh yeah, here's the information that's required. Maybe it's already in your syllabus and you just have to pull it out in some sort of a way. So you can create your own template if they don't have one using some of that information and then use that as your template over and over and over again. If you have a standard page that has your contact info, your emergency contact info, some digital resources, a walkthrough of how to use Zoom or Teams or the LMS or any of those things that students are going to need, where they get their digital textbook, what emergency procedures are, and you just reuse those every time, then you're not having to create this every time. And again, your university might have standards for those things that you can start to use, that you can build off of. But if for whatever reason they don't, no one is stopping you from building your own template or customizing your own template in that kind of a way. I'm gonna let Beth take that next idea because that's a big one of hers. So I want her to be able to talk about having something ready in terms of like quizzes, assignments, discussions.
I've said this before, and I do this for my own in-person courses. I think it's a transition if you aren't used to doing that for in-person teaching, but I also think you'll benefit from it. Having something in mind, like kind of module by module. I'm teaching, your syllabus is divided up into some kind of units, into some kind of discrete parts through which you move over the course of the semester. If you reflect that in your LMS page, because every university provides LMS pages for each of the courses you're teaching, you've got that contact info, that canned stuff already created. Then for each individual course, as you're creating your assignments and things for your in-person course, create a copy of that just load it into your LMS. Be ready then to move over when that remote disruption happens and just make those visible to your students. It is extra work, and I don't think you should sit down over the summer and say, I'm going to do all 6 preps that I have and get them ready. I think you have to start adopting this as a transitional kind of thing. But once they're there, then they're useful for you in all of your teaching. You can add a discussion. You don't have to use the LMS for your in-person discussions, but you've got your stuff mapped out. You've got it in Microsoft Word. You've got it on your desktop or your laptop. You can easily shift to that if you're in a remote situation and have students start talking to each other about whatever they would be talking about in class. If they're in the middle of an assignment, if you've already got that laid out, whatever the scaffolded steps are, drafts for a paper, any kind of research or assignment, you can already put copies of that into the LMS and they can continue. You can also rethink what is it that they can achieve reasonably in this period where we're not together, we're not in the learning situation that they're used to performing in, because your students may be as unfamiliar with the online environment as you are, or maybe even more unfamiliar. So you might want to scale back. I'm not asking you to create fully online courses. I'm saying try thinking about what is coming up in each section of your course and how you could reflect that. What do you typically do? You go in the class, there's a lecture, there's some discussion, there's some breakout into groups, maybe there's some in-class writing. It's harder for lab classes. I am not able to do as much support for people who have to recreate that. I think in their cases, they usually shift to a short-term type of assignment that doesn't, involve actually lab activity, but the reading around, the discussing around, the writing reports. Having some familiarity with how you can set those up in the LMS will let you just move right into it. Quizzes are a little harder. If you haven't been doing quizzes in an LMS before, you're going to be concerned about the integrity of that. So you might want to think about having a lower stakes kind of assessment and save the exams for when you get back to your normal setting. But if you find yourself in a long-term teaching remotely situation, as we did with lockdown and maybe with Ida, and I think in Lake Charles with the hurricanes, and didn't they have an ice storm also? Yes. They probably had to do that on a longer term. So there are tools in the LMS for proctoring. They do use a lot of bandwidth, so you're going to have to make decisions on that front. It would be better to think about them ahead of time than to just say, damn, I had a quiz scheduled. What am I going to do? What's an alternative that I could do for that? You may be able to meet with your students one-on-one in small Zoom groups and do some in-person quizzing just to get a sense. Yes, they're progressing, they've got this, they can move on.
So just to add to that too, some of the templating is just having something in place ready for you to go, even if you're not showing it to your students. So if you have a standard way that you are putting assignments together and you are having them submit those assignments online as well as in person, just as standard practice for whatever reason, they're already going to know how to do that. If you have one of those community discussion boards that Beth has suggested that are so invaluable on your LMS, that's something for them to start with and a place for them to go while you're setting it up. And again, if you set those up the same way every time, they have that familiarity and they know what they're doing. And then the final piece that I'll say here before I'll show you some templating examples is that it helps with quality review. Right? Maybe you're not worrying about your online course quality in your emergency remote teaching, because emergency remote teaching is certainly not a full online course, as Beth has said. It cannot be. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't want our students to be getting the best that they can. And if for whatever reason you were to turn that into an online class, if you have a bunch of these things already, I promise you, you're going to be down that checklist of whatever quality scorecard you're using. You're going to be set. If you are setting up this template and you have something ready and you have your contact info and emergency and digital resources and tutorials on how to use them, and you're using UDL and everything is accessible because of that, that is like half the template, right? Or half the scorecard right there. I can promise you. I've looked at a lot of those. So it's really going to help with making sure that you have quality. So let's look at what a template is just really quickly. This one is the one that we put into UNO courses. Again, there might be one that your university puts into yours, or it might be something that they have as a recommended that you can pull in. We're using Canvas now, so this one is in Canvas. And we're going to get some close-up looks on some of this also, so don't worry if it's a little bit hard to see. But the idea here is that you just have some stuff built out, have some stuff ready to go so that you know where to put things, even if you don't have them built out fully. So let me show you what that means. Okay, so first, what we have put in for every instructor, thinking about y'all sort of as our students, are instructions on how to use this. The same way that I'm telling you for your students to have instructions, we want to have instructions for you. We've given all of our faculty sandboxes. So this is our sandbox template so that they can do that thing that we've been saying and practice and have something set up. Even if they don't have it in their specific learning management shell for that course yet, it's built out and ready to go and ready to import when an emergency happens. And again, we give them all of those instructions on how to do that because they're kind of like our students. And they need instructions. Y'all need instructions too, just like your students do. This isn't your job to think about this and be an expert. It's our job to help you do that. So we want to set up whatever we can to help you, to help your students, and so on and so forth. Okay, a lot of this is the stuff that we were talking about having that you should really have in every class in your learning management system, whether or not this is an online class, even if you never go to emergency remote teaching for any reason. How useful is it for students when they come into your course and they see something that says course overview and they know to look there? They see something that says about your instructor and they know to look there. Then they know a little bit about me. They know who I am. I'm obviously going to have my contact info there. If I didn't know where to find contact info for my instructor, and I looked at my learning management system and I saw something that said about your instructor, I'd probably look there. I'd hope so. I'm a college student, I'd hope. And then we have, that question board. That's also the same thing as that sort of community resource. You can use that way. It can also just be an open space for them to ask questions about the course to each other. Have that ready to go, even if you're not using it, or you could use that in your in-person classes. Where are they going to post that question at 10 p.m. when they want help with homework, rather than necessarily emailing you? Maybe a student sees that and is like, oh yeah, it's pages 5 through 25 that you have to read, and they've put it in the question board, and then everyone can see it, which is great. It's extremely helpful. So that kind of stuff that you can have built out, ready to go. And then we have these resources and supports. Again, those Canvas resources for students, that's the kind of technical stuff that we're talking about where they're not going to know how to use things. You can customize that and build that out however you want. We're just giving you a starting plate, a template for your template, is what we're doing. And then we also have ones that are specific to UNO. I'm sure your universities have similar things where they have lists of resources that students should have, even if they don't have that ready for you in the LMS already. That's a thing that you can create as a page in your LMS and put it there. Again, ready to go. And then we have this idea. Okay, so we were talking about having a quiz ready to go, having a discussion ready to go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here they are. None of these are built out. None of these have real information. These are templates for them. And again, I'm pretty sure I have one here where I can show you what I mean using a discussion. But you can see they have told you how to set up a module doing this, right? This is it. We've told you how to set up a module. An overview of what you're doing in the module. Here's what you're going to learn, the presentation, the video, the transcript, the page, whatever. You're going to discuss a thing. You're going to demonstrate some knowledge. Here's a little wrap up. And again, if you're doing that, your course quality through the roof, promise. But even if you're only taking pieces of this, this gives you an idea of how students can move through this, and you've got this set up, ready to go ahead of time. So yeah, this is what this looks like when you have this set up. And again, a lot of your universities will have something for you, but even if you set this up for yourself, you can set up a little lorem ipsum text, a little placeholder text here, and make little notes for yourself. This is the one that we have for our instructors, so it's got notes for how to use it for them. But this is ready to go. I know where to put my guidelines here. I have a link for my students to get to technical support if they're having problems with it. I can put in whatever I need. This is ready to go. It is something that I can copy over to whatever class, have an assignment, change the dates, change the points, put in the new thing, boom, done. I'm not thinking about what does this look like? How will my students know how to use it? And again, if I'm doing this for all of my assignments, even if they're ones that they turn in person, if I'm using this format ahead of time, they're used to seeing this format. They know this format. It's not a mystery to them when I ask them to do this. It is familiar and standard. So they're not going to worry about it in the same way. And that's really all you're doing here, is setting yourself up for success so that you can set your students up for success. And like I said, on that technical button clicky aspect, I wanted to be able to show you this as a breakdown of the types of things that you can do. And maybe it doesn't have to be this fancy. This one's kind of fancy. I like fancy things, but if yours isn't that fancy, that's okay. It can just be a standard thing where they know that they're going to look at an assignment and it's going to have the same things, right? Maybe it has the rubric attached. Maybe rather than being just like a PDF document that they download that has the instructions, it is like this on the assignment page. So when they click on the assignment to submit it, it has all the things. And maybe if it's an in-person assignment, there's no points attached to that, or however your LMS allows you to put in in-person assignments, but you're still used to giving them this. And you can set this up for discussions, for quizzes. You can put in sample questions just ready to go so that you can change them, just so that you are familiar in some kind of a way. We also have a very fancy homepage on our Canvas that's a template. It's not required, but just to show you the types of things that you can set up just on a homepage level. If you are using Canvas, you can set this kind of thing up again in advance as a template. This is something that we give to all of our faculty as a possibility. They don't have to use it. But if I was a student and I came to this, again, I'd have to change course title, course section, name, et cetera, et cetera. That gives me that information that I know right there. I can add a short welcome message. If I'm doing emergency remote teaching, I can update that message to tell students, hey, here's what's going on. Here's how we are doing this week, this day. And when they come into my course in my LMS, that's the thing that they're going to see. I'm going to figure out what it is that they're going to see up front. And if you're using Moodle, there's a little bit of a different way to do this, but there's still text that is right up front. I promise you, that is the first thing that they're going to see. And anything that you can do to template that out so that you are ready to just import it into another course, good to go. You just change this stuff. You can see some of the stuff we suggested here. Your name, a brief bio, course structure. Again, you can change that. You can say, this day we're doing emergency remote teaching, so we're doing blah, blah, blah. You want to give them their objectives, what excites you about the course, what should students be excited about the course. And you have that set up even if you aren't emergency remote teaching. How useful for your students. I promise you your students are looking at your LMS whether you are or not. They're looking to the LMS to find things, to find information.
2 weeks before classes begin. Yes.
Yeah, weeks before classes begin. They
They're looking
definitely
for it.
are. They want that information. And this is the place that they have it, right? We're no longer in the world where class starts on the first day when you walk into class.
They will
That
have
does
read the
not,
syllabus before that.
yeah,
Yes.
that's not
At
the
the
world
very
that we're
least.
in.
The very least. They'll have read that, yes.
They'll have read your syllabus. So have that stuff available. Make it welcoming. The same way you'd want to welcome them into your classroom with the first day. Welcome everybody. Come sit down. We'll get started. I'm so excited. I'm your teacher, whatever. Give them the digital version of that. And then they're used to looking here. And when you update this for emergency remote teaching, they are used to going there to see things. They're used to going there. That preparation part, that, I call it fire drill, that practice, it's so key. Because in those situations, and I know you hear us say this before, you get so flustered. You get so overwhelmed. You don't want to have to think about it, and neither do your students. I don't want to have to learn something new when I'm literally watching my camera from my house, because I wasn't at my house during the storm, trying to see if my tree snapped. Like, this is what I was literally doing during the hurricane last week, was sitting there and watching my camera until power went out, trying to see if my tree snapped because it was bending like really far. But while I did that, I also had to answer student emails and make sure my students were getting their content. And I didn't want to have to think about how I was doing that. I wanted that to be ready to go. And I wanted my students to know what that communication was ahead of time. And they did, because this is the kind of thing that I do, that we set this up for them. So.
And your students were literally under the eye of that.
They were. I adjunct at Nichols, so my students were literally under the eye of it, and I got about a lot of emails saying, "This is the first time I got in power. I checked Canvas, and I see that you extended some deadlines," because they knew where to check. I just wanted to let you know that I'm okay. I got a bunch of those emails. It was great that, one, they were emailing me, and two, that they knew where to look. If you don't have a sandbox, ask for one. If your LMS administrator gets annoyed with you, you can tell them that I told you to annoy them about it. Come email me about it. Because you want to be able to practice your skills. The same way you want your students to be able to practice your skills, you want to be able to practice your skills.
And you can develop the stuff you're going to be importing into course after course. My contact info, what you need to know, that kind of thing. That's all not tied to any particular thing that you're teaching. So you only have to do it once, you do it in your sandbox, and you can import it year after year.
And I think that is pretty much it for us. We have some resources that we used in developing this presentation, so that, you can all know that we did our research and we didn't just make things up. So we have our citations like good academics, but that's really it. Do y'all have any questions for us in our last few minutes?
Can't recommend cast.org more. Just want to throw that in. Of all these on here, that's the easiest one to remember. It's just cast.org. It's wide ranging, but you will get the basics of UDL. And once you have that, I think you're ready to do so many things.
Absolutely. And I do want to quickly say, I know we focused a lot on sort of climate and bigger things. You'll notice one of the things that we said to have in your template or ready to go for your students is emergency contact information for you. Because we know that there have been situations where campus email has gone down. And so your LMS maybe isn't going to be the thing that they can get to first, though it will be up quickly because I promise you every university is prioritizing that. So it'll be up as quickly as they can. But you just want to have that backup email, right? Where can they send it? Where can they send you an email? You can ask them for emergency contact information if you want, but where can they get in touch with you? Maybe that's a Google Voice number that you only have for emergencies. Maybe that is a personal email that you set up just for your teaching email, like Meredith King, super teacher at Gmail. I'm not going to use that for other things. I don't want to give them my actual email, but I could set up a fake one, not fake one, just for these purposes that lives outside of the system, just in case. Anything that you can do, again, to have that level of preparedness is going to be very, very helpful. And so we know that the LMS might go down. And so that one extra layer, again, where they already know that, where they already have that information, you've given it to them ahead of time so that you're not trying to somehow get them your emergency information when there is the emergency. And that's really it for us if y'all don't have any questions.
Thank you, Katie, for the note you posted there.
You guys, we very much appreciate you. Please, if you enjoyed this and think your friends or your colleagues could benefit, once the recording's rendered, we'll share that on social media, and it's always available on our system YouTube. Please share it out. We love leveraging our resources.
We love being a resource.
We do. All right. Well, thanks, y'all, and everyone. Stay safe and stay prepared. When you can't be safe, you can be prepared. And that's what we want you to take away.
No one knows what's coming next.